is we're all betting that we're going to get a hole-in-one, because if we don't, we could potentially lose our businesses. The kind of claims here are enormous. One class action suit without adequate insurance blows most companies out of the water. Not to mention what it does to the focus of the entrepreneur running that business, when he's now taking his eye off selling widgets and onto defending that widgets don't in fact cause cancer. It creates all kinds of consequences that we simply, I don't think, ready for in South Africa's current context. Safety. Can you imagine if you were a motor car manufacturer in the recent times now, where we talk about brake failures and incendiary locking devices? Think about that. Think about the class actions that can happen there. I use the analogy of lawyers rubbing their hands like pigs before a feeding trough, because that's what this legislation is for lawyers. And I don't mean to denigrate my own profession, but we know that the tests that we would have to have previously, or hurdles that we would previously have had to jump in terms of our law of dealings, with the statutory warranties and the strict liabilities that are contained in this Act, it just removes 2 or 3 of the hurdles to what was before relatively easy litigation anyway. So, are the floodgates going to open? My view is yes. What do? We try and insure. We try and insure, but if our insurance company doesn't understand what we're insuring for, how do we deal with that? So it now becomes a very frank discussion with our broker. I want you to come to my business, Mr. Broker. I want you to assess what liability I have in this Act. And I want you to give me a warranty that I am covered, because that's what I'm paying you for. Very direct questions and statements that you need to now be making to your brokers. And I want an undertaking, if you could ever get one, from the underwriters to say that they have considered my business in terms of this Act, and that I am covered for the eventualities that might arise out of here. If not, set out in terms what you will and won't be covered for. It now falls for you to understand what your insurance contract means, because it's now where the real big claims. This is not crashing your city golf into another city golf. This is terminal if it goes wrong. The statutory warranty. What is the statutory warranty? Statutory warranty is if I buy a good, I can, for 6 months, return it to the store for 3 reasons. 1, it's defective. That's obvious. 2, it's not fit for the purposes I bought it for. What does that mean? What does that mean? We were debating earlier at the table. I want to buy a new bakkie because I've decided that I want to tow my boat. Instead of having my boat in the Simonstown Marina, I want to tow my fishing boat around to wherever I go, to my holiday house at Strasbourg. So I go down to the local bakkies centre and I say, I'd like to buy a bakkie. At the moment, all that will happen is I'll be told about the wonders of the bakkie that I want to buy, whether or not they in fact exist, and I'll buy it, and that'll be that. And 6 months later, I'll find, well, in fact, this bakkie's not so great on the sand. This bakkie's, the 4x4 is, I actually needed a 4x4, I didn't need a 2x4. I've got problems. Well, what would I do in terms of this Act? I'd drive that vehicle back into the store and I'd say, no, my friend, I needed a 4x4. You sold me a 2x4. I told you what I wanted the vehicle for. I want my money back. You can now have this vehicle back. What happens to a vehicle the moment you put a number plate on it? The price drops. You drive out the door, you've lost, I don't know what the percentage is, Eric, what would the percentage be that you've lost on a vehicle? 20%. What's the average margin that a dealer is making? It's not 20%. So he's got 5%, Eric tells us. So he's at a 15% loss the moment I drive in. And that's presupposing that he can sell it the same day, that it doesn't sit in his floor. Now, how do you deal with this? In my view, you would have to deal with it through education. So if you're in a business where you have salesmen, you need to tell salesmen not to lie. You need to tell salesmen the difference between lies and exaggeration. You need to tell the difference between lies, exaggeration, and puffery. You need to tell the difference between lies, exaggeration, puffery, and honesty. But we all know, I mean, what are the jokes about second-hand car salesmen? And I'm not knocking them either. Some of my best friends are second-hand car salesmen. They will be shortly.
We'll get rid of the salesman.
But you need, in jokes aside, in all honesty, what you need is an education program. Your staff need to be trained on what the consumer's rights are. If this is not top of mind in your staff, read supplier when you see your staff, because they are the supplier, acting on your behalf in the course and scope of their duties, supplying a product to a consumer. If they are not fully au fait and willing to abide by this, they must work somewhere else, or you are going to be committing commercial suicide. One day or another, you're going to have that class action or that lawsuit start. And I don't know how many of you have ever been involved in litigation. Litigation is not even nice for lawyers. Okay? You don't want to be the recipient, be it the plaintiff, be it the defendant. Law cases are not fun. Nobody wants to be put in a box and tested, whether they're telling the truth or not. You stand in that witness box, it's an unpleasant place. You should be in your business, doing business. So protect yourself and avoid having to have these kind of things tested. So will it apply to your business? The simple answer is yes. Doesn't matter who you are, you're in. What does a consumer include? Now you see, we consider a consumer somebody who goes down to the shop and buys something. But this act goes further than that. Any person to whom goods and services are supplied, so they've got the goods, marketed. So I'm a consumer, I haven't even got the product. But you've marketed your product to me. I'm a consumer, I've got rights in terms of this act. Third parties who consume the goods or services. So I go around to Clive Nolan's house for a bribe, and he's bought a fillet from his local butcher and it poisons me. I'm a consumer. Not only does Clive get to have a crack, but everybody around the table gets to have a go as a consumer. Excuse me. So think about how wide the net becomes. It's enormous. Franchisees, they are clapping their hands with glee. You see, there was a threshold that's going to sit in this act about who will be determined as a consumer. So natural persons will always be consumers. Natural persons, you and I, flesh and blood, breathing, blah, blah. We will always be consumers. Juristic persons, so trusts, not really a juristic person, but in terms of this act, they're considered one. Companies, closed corporations, I think certain types of partnerships, I'll check on that, are considered juristic persons. Now, if they trade amongst each other, there's a threshold, an asset base or a turnover base, that if they're higher than this threshold, the act won't apply to their transactions between them and other excluded persons. Those thresholds are yet to be determined. There was rumors at one stage that they were going to be the same as the National Credit Act, i.e. R1 million turnover or R1 million asset value. I don't know where those rumors came from, but I hear further rumors now saying 5 million or 10 million. If it's 10 million, basically almost everybody you deal with will be involved. 5 million the same, 1 million, it still will be a vast number of people. The state is never a consumer. So if you supply anything to the state, they don't have any rights in terms of this act. The state is assumed to